Hey everybody, Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. Got to do an update on Laurel, which is becoming a monster storm. So this vlog is going to focus on two things. First, the immediate impacts and what's going on down on the Gulf Coast. But then secondarily, for people in the Carolinas and further inland, we're going to talk about possibly some downstream impacts on Saturday into Sunday with the system. It'll be kind of interesting to see how this unfolds going into the weekend. If you woke up this morning, you know it's rapid intensification happened. We knew this was going to happen at some point, and typically this does happen at night when we get a what we call a diurnal maximum in convection. At night, remember, the air cools down, but the water is super warm. That creates instability because the ground is super warm and muggy. In this case, it's the water surface, which is warm and muggy, and the air above is cooler because loss of daytime heating. So that difference creates a lot of convection, a lot of thunderstorm activity. So at night, we typically see big plumes of convection with these. And if you look carefully, the eye is very well formed. In fact, I'm seeing the hints of a hub, which if you think about a hub is basically a little hub cloud is a ring in the middle. That's a sign that maybe one eye has shrunk and is getting, kind of phasing out, and a new one is going to replace it. We call that an eye wall replacement cycle. So that'll really dictate the strength. There is a little bit of wind shear as it gets close to the coast, but here's the thing. It doesn't matter at this point. When a storm gets this strong over the Gulf, the water's already moving. We're already seeing flooding in southeast Louisiana. This is like a giant bulldozer in the Gulf of Mexico pushing water towards the coast. Even if this storm were to stop right now, the momentum of that water is already there. So storm surge by far our biggest concern. Second is wind. Obviously, it's a Cat 4 storm. We're going to see devastating wind damage with this. But to me, the storm surge has me more concerned because it could penetrate 30 miles inland. If you're not familiar with this part of Louisiana, it's probably the most susceptible area of the country to storm surge. It's very low lying. It's marshy. It takes a long time to get above sea level to go inland. So you're looking at a lot of water coming inland. So here's the track. And again, I'll put the short version here first. Could be a category 4 tonight, possibly category 5. Probably not going to matter. You know, we get caught up in these categories. Once it reaches this kind of storm, the numbers are kind of irrelevant. The impacts are all you need to focus on. And it's going to plow into southwest Louisiana, extreme eastern Texas. And by 1 o'clock in the morning, I think it's going to make landfall. Just looking at the difference between these two, maybe 2 in the morning, 3, sometime overnight, midnight to sunrise, and then moving up the Sabine River through Thursday morning. Then beyond there, we'll talk about that in a minute. But let's talk about the impacts, because there will be extreme impacts here in southwest Louisiana, eastern Texas, and they will extend far inland. That's the thing. If you have time to evacuate east or west. Do not go this way, because you'll get out of the water. I mean, trust me, I would rather you evacuate from the water, but you could be moving into an area where there will be no power and flash flooding. And that's the concern up here. We could see strong winds well inland, but the flash flood threat well up here into the Ohio and Tennessee valleys will be pretty elevated for this storm. So I do think we will see flooding and probably strong winds. And then going east, we'll talk about the wind threats in a minute. I promise that we'll talk about that, but let me focus in on the storm surge here. Again, 15 to 20 foot storm surge, and again, penetrating 30 miles inland. That's crazy. You know, you've got so many of these lakes down here and inlets and bayous and canals. That water just has a lot of avenues to get inland, and it's low lying. So you're going to see, even in New Orleans, you're going to see 2 to 4 feet of storm surge, especially Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Bourne, Lake Maurepas. I've seen this a lot. Rita made landfall over here in 2005, and we saw pretty significant flooding. Obviously, it was after Katrina, so the levees weren't there, but there was extensive flooding. The city reflooded basically after Katrina when Rita moved off to the east. So storm surge, a huge, huge issue long range. And then we'll talk about the rainfall well inland. And this is the concern with rainfall. Notice how it moves all the way up here into Ohio Valley. So flash flooding combined with maybe 40, 50 mile an hour winds definitely would cause trees to come down. So you're probably talking power outages, flooding, and a lot of issues all the way up into Arkansas, Missouri, maybe even western Tennessee, Kentucky, and the Ohio Valley up in this area. Now, once it gets up in here, there will be some things to talk about, and I'm going to get to I promise I'll get to the second part in a second. I want to go back to the surge real quickly just to highlight this part, because this cannot be emphasized enough, how much storm surge is coming inland. These red numbers are 12 feet plus, and again, 20 feet of water up into Lake Charles, I think this is underdone, honestly. I think this is going to be a lot more than that. Let me show you the max water inundation above ground. I think this gives you a little better idea. So you can see how the water overruns all the barrier islands, Cameron, Louisiana. Everyone should be gone here. And notice how far inland. I mean, you're going way up into Lake Charles. And even here, I think we'll see flooding maybe up pretty close to Interstate 10 in some locations. So any little wiggle or wobble in the track could definitely bring some higher surge. And also keep an eye on your tide cycle. High tide, low tide will have a huge impact on this. So, and also notice far to the east, we get caught up in this track, but again, the impacts are well off to the east and even to the southwest. There will be some pretty good surge, even in Galveston Bay, though the flow coming around the storm should keep that water back out. So you got to watch the bay side and sound side flooding, we like to call it here in the Carolinas, where you get sound side flooding with some of those issues. So what's steering this thing? This is where we need to talk about long range, because we've got a couple things. We've got a trough here. We've got high pressure here, which is spinning clockwise, and it's going to rotate like this. And then we've got another digging trough coming down. So here's the thing. This is going to go like this, and this trough's going to come down, and they're going to merge somewhere in here. And that's still a lot of questions about how those two things interact, because if they get together, we will have a tropical system, or a remnant one, moving up here, and the jet stream winds interacting with it. And sometimes that creates a phenomena we call sting jet. Now, it's really hard to forecast. I've seen hints of it in the models. And what that does is that brings really strong winds to areas along the path. So I want to show you a couple things here. I'm going to go first to the wind speed swath from the European model. The European model is the most gangbusters with this, bringing some heavy winds into the mountains of North Carolina and even into the Piedmont. Now, these aren't sustained winds, so don't get too worried, but these are maximum gust we could see for any period of time through Saturday night. So you can see there's some 50, 60 mile per hour wind gusts possible as it moves through the Carolinas. But here's the weird thing. The GFS has almost nothing, 30 mile an hour gusts, so about half. So we've got one model going crazy with it, and it's been pretty consistent, and one that's not so consistent with it. As far as rainfall, this is the weird thing. We could see really strong winds and not a whole lot of rain. So all the guidance is showing very little rainfall for the Carolinas, except for maybe the mountains and the southwest mountains. But even there, that's not crazy rain. That's 1 to 2, 3 inches. That's certainly not a big deal. Obviously, we don't want to saturate the soil and cause and this is actually through Wednesday. So let me back this up. If I go through Sunday night, this is Sunday night, even less rain. So it just doesn't look like a lot of rain with this. And Hurricane Center kind of agrees with this as well. So I'm not really worried about rain. I'm really worried about wind because of this potential that we could see that merger with the trough and create some heavy wind. So let's break down the timing of all this. So let's look at the timing of the winds. Obviously, monster storm moving through the Gulf of Mexico moves up. And again, this is based on the European model. So this is the most bullish wind forecast for the Carolinas. Moves it up through, parts of Arkansas. You can see even strong winds. Look at that, 50, 60, maybe even 70 mile an hour gust in there. Then it takes that right turn, and here comes the trough. It starts, you saw, I can tell it's merging with the trough. Notice how the winds start to spread out a little bit, and the trough is coming down from the northwest. So that's kind of setting the stage for this. Then it pushes to the east, and watch this move through Tennessee, the mountains. And again, these are wind gusts, not sustained, so I just want to clarify that. So Saturday afternoon starts moving through the mountains. Saturday night starts moving down into the Piedmont, and notice the winds, 43 mile an hour gust, 33. Right here, there's a gust briefly to 55 over Charlotte. So, and then it moves out. It's really quick. It's like almost like a line of thunderstorms for a couple hours, hitting through here and then moves out pretty quickly. So that's fascinating to see if that unfolds. And again, this is based on the European model, which is the most bullish of all the guidance on this wind setup. Now let's talk about rainfall and overall setup, and I'll show you the GFS guidance on this. So based on the Hurricane Center forecast, you can see the center is expected to go pretty far to our northwest. So when we start looking at that European guidance, it's actually showing something more like this. So this is why I still am a little questioning this, but I want people to know that that's a possibility. If it takes this more northern track, we might not have any issues here at all. I certainly think even with either track, rain is not going to be an issue, but we could see that potential for wind. So let's start looking at some of the guidance here at the GFS. What I'm going to do is pop up the GFS model now. All right, so here's the GFS model, and we'll break down the timing. This actually has rain, and a couple things to point out. The kind of brown lines are the 500 millibar heights, and sea level pressure is blue. And I'll tell you why that's important, because that's how we know if the upper trough and the system are actually merging. Then the winds are actually those arrows at the surface, so just their wind direction. So we go through time. You could see the GFS, very similar to the European model, and bringing it up through the same location. So there's a lot of good model consensus on the first 2 days of this. It's once we get towards here where things start to vary. Notice the GFS brings it much closer to Kentucky than to Tennessee. And notice how there's a merger. So we've got a dip in the jet stream here that's merging with the surface. So it's becoming kind of a hybrid system here. It's extratropical. But notice where the system is. This is Saturday, or Friday night. The system's up here. Now we have scattered showers across our area, but the worst of the weather's up here in Kentucky. So I'm going through time here. This is 2 a.m. Saturday morning. We'll go to 8 a.m. So here's 8 a.m. Saturday morning. Notice all the messes up here. Not a whole lot going down here in Charlotte. And then it pushes off to the east, and you can see most of the energy is up in these areas up to our northeast. So the fact that it's staying to our north in this guidance is something to keep an eye on as well. So you've got kind of a long range. You've got some issues here on where it's going to be. Is it going to be here or here? And definitely you see how the lines are all equal here now. We've got the trough, which is right there. And we've also got a troughing at the surface. So we've merged a surface system with the upper trough, and this becomes extratropical. So this becomes your good old-fashioned, extratropical system. So the model is just coming in, the latest run as I'm recording this. So I only have 18 hours of it, so I'll have to see where it ends up. But it really depends on a couple things. The high pressure's here. Does it stay up to the north? Does it push down to the south a little bit? And how deep does the trough get before it gets here? So you could see why there's a dilemma in forecasting. You've got three things kind of working in concert, and anytime you have three things, there's a lot of monkey wrenches to toss around. So we'll keep an eye on that, but just a heads up in the Carolinas, I want you to be aware of this potential that we could see, the potential for wind. I'm not overly concerned, like I said, with rain at this point. I just don't see a lot of that, but this does have me a little concerned here that we could see maybe some strong winds, which would knock down some branches, maybe cause some power outages, even some trees. So, and again, the timing of this is Saturday into Saturday night, if we see anything at all. Of course, I will do detailed updates on this after landfall, because we'll start focusing on that, and you could get complete updates on this whole mess, lore and everything starting today at 4, 5, and 6 on WCNC Charlotte. I'll see you then.